Our next speaker, James Benham, is the president of the Indiana Farmers Union. Many of you who've been following what Lyndon LaRouche's warnings have been concerning our economic disaster, particularly with respect to our food supply, our non-existent food supply, will be pleased to know that there are people from the time-honored tradition of American agriculture that are standing and fighting for Glass-Steagall because they understand that Glass-Steagall represents mutually assured economic survival in the same way that the SDI represents mutually assured survival against nuclear attack. Mr. Benham.
Well, good afternoon, folks. I've been told that I have an accent, so if you can bear with me, we'll try to struggle through that. But I am your ag man for the day. My job is to wear many hats and a different one everywhere I go. But at home, I plant corn and soybeans. That's my livelihood. So out on the road, I normally try, and as we discuss things on the Hill and what's going on in the world, our mission is simple. We plant seeds. And we plant those seeds, and some of them sprout, some of them wither, die in the dry ground, or get drowned out. But those who sprout, we're going to culture them, we're going to nurture them, we're going to feed them, we're going to try to bring them to harvest. And one of the things I want to talk about today with Glass-Steagall is the fact that agriculture is at a point in time where we need that to change some of the practices we have as far as the value of our commodities. I'm going to take you back about 100 years, and I don't want you all to sit there and die in your chair because this will be pretty quick. But in that time frame, during 1904 through 1907, we were classified with industry as parity. And my understanding of that, and some of you that may know better than I what parity consists of, is the fact that you could buy a farm in 1904 or 1907 and buy a factory or a business in town, and you could expect to make a living on the same amount of dollars invested in each of those entities with the same return on your investment being said there. So over the years, agriculture's kind of went sideways to down a bit, and industries went up. And that went along there to about right before World War II. Now, as I was growing up in life, the people that were educating me, my neighbors, my dad, thought that World War II brought around prosperity for agriculture, when in fact, getting in some of the dealings I've had here in the last few years, come to find out that Roosevelt, with the surplus issues we had with tires, rubber, and steel, felt like that agriculture needed to be a part of that, and brought into play parity for a few years. Well, after that, World War II come back, all the folks come back home, and things started booming again. And we went back to a policy where we needed to have as cheap as food as possible and an abundance of supply of that. So with that being said, we got into a farm bill, and there's a slide on that someplace, and I'll explain that, but prior to that, we got into a 1949 law. And that law dictates that if we cannot pass a farm bill, we will revert back to parity. Now, somewhere in there, we can't achieve that without Glass-Steagall because the powers that be just will not permit it. It'll be the big globe and the little globe. All right, this is the farm bill that was projected and we fought for last summer. And we were on the Hill, and it got as far as the Senate. And to give you an idea, they projected that as a baseline, I think that's based over 2013 to 2022, that the federal outlay was going to be $44 trillion. A big chunk of change. But the farm bill of that is that little chunk of 2.96% of that total outlay. And then within that farm bill, the nutritional part of that is 79.2%, as you can see. And the rest of those, you got crop insurance at 9.9, commodities at 4.5, conservation, and other. Now, all that gets jumbled in, and we'll go on the Hill and we'll talk about that a bit. And I'm a little different than some of my colleagues because I want to know what's on the mind of our representatives, not so much what I don't want to tell them what's on my mind. They've got that figured out when we walk through the door. So I asked him, I said, what you guys, what's your take on this? And he said, well, depending on which side of the aisle you're talking to, they want to trim out the nutritional part of that package out of the Farm Bill. So it doesn't belong there. That's argumentative. In my personal perspective, I think they're probably correct. However, we'd never pass the Farm Bill without it because we got to partner with those representatives that have no background in agriculture but still need traditional values for their constituents. So with that being said, we went down to December 31st this year, or the 30th, without a Farm Bill. January the 1st, if we did not pass one, we would revert back to the 49 law. Now, I've got another slide up here on farmer share, if you bring it up. I'll explain a bit on that one. It'll be the one with the 15% on top or 15.8, whatever. Now, can everyone see that? Well, the one thing I want to bring your attention to is the Farm Bill structured out over the year. Now, my commodities, if we had not passed the Farm Bill, would not have taken effect till this fall, September 1st. However, milk and eggs takes effect January 1. And the powers to be had to come to some kind of agreement because they couldn't bear the fact that $4.12 you're looking at there would have turned into $6.50 or $7 January the 2nd. So when we talk about parity, it's a real thing, but it comes at a cost. You know, it's how do we get there without upsetting an apple cart is going to be the next question. And we need to have a conversation about some of these things. And this is where agriculture's went and gotten to. We try to convey that message that, look, we're in trouble. I can tell you right now the dairy guys in California are in desperate need. I was in Massachusetts last week, Springfield. I sat on national board for National Farmers Union. Sat on policy committee, or make policy with that, but I wasn't on the committee this time. But we spent a day and a half, on dairy alone. And the problem is, dairy folks are across the nation. Each of us think just a little differently. And those folks cannot come to a really good agreement on how to figure out how to compromise the dairy industries. And I know we're at a food crisis. And one thing I want you to understand, and I'll go beyond that, and I'm skipping around here a bit, but does everybody know how far your dinner plate travels to get to you? 1,500 miles, the average. So in our time frame and all the things going on with Congress on the Hill and all the issues we've got in our nation and all the catastrophic issues we talked about this morning that could happen to us, we have a glitch in policy, a glitch in anything, trucking, weather, whatever. I'm going to ask you as an audience, how many days food supply do you have at your house? Do you have 6 weeks? Do you have a month? All right, 2 weeks. Can you get by a week? You need to think about this one. I'm serious. You need to really go out here, and I'm not telling you to provide for the end of the world, but if we got this fragile chain we're dealing with, we're only as strong as the weakest link. And when that pops, it's going to take a few days to get it back together. You know, I don't think we're out of food per se in as much in the United States, but globally, we do not have enough food today to sustain the population we have. Dennis mentioned a while ago, 2040, how many was that, 11 billion? Man, you're putting the pressure on me. And the problem is, I was asked earlier, you know, do we have any farmers markets where I'm from in southeast Indiana? No. And I'm in a rural area. The only thing we do have, we have an auction once a week by the Amish. And the reason the Amish are doing it, because their way of life is a little different than what we're accustomed to. They'll do without a lot of things that we will not. But parity needs to come into play because we need to have those opportunities to produce food for everyone locally if possible. And Glass-Steagall is probably the tool to get us there. You know, I can go on and talking about different things. One of the things that I want to kick on just a second, it's going to be could be a little controversy, but in the 50s, after we got the first farm bill in place that I'm aware of, and we set aside parity, the government come into place. Okay, we're going to help you guys, and the biggest thing we got within is commodities, row crops, wheat, corn, soybeans is the big deal we've been dealing with. We're going to let you guys get a certain price level, but we're going to let you set aside a certain amount of production because we are our own worst enemy. We overproduce. We follow the dollar, and whatever that dollar brings for us, that's what we want to make. We're no different than anybody else. So when we get into parity, what are we going to do with the excess? You know, how are we going to manage that? And how do we get that to world events where it works for everybody? So we got some challenges, but we're still back to the thing, communication. Communication is the key to all lots. We must talk about our problems. We must be able to disagree agreeably. I was coming in here, the first thing I was going to ask you, how many of you believe we got global warming? And that's a political football. There are folks who think, from depending on what side of the aisle you talk to, that we've got global warming. Basically, man has made that issue. You go to the other side of the aisle, it's an anomaly. I will tell you this. A year ago in April in southern Indiana, we were planting corn, April 1st. Today, in this week, we're having a snowstorm. That's a pretty big swing. So, you know, we got a lot of issues we deal with, and weather's one of them. You know, commodity values is another one. Speculators is horrible. They talked about farmers, said, you know, you guys need to get a little smarter. In the 80s, said, you guys go to school, learn how to speculate, you know, be a part of that group. You know, you can get working your way through prosperity by buying and selling your grain. I told the wife, yeah, I can do that. Man, I can get right here. I can be one of them guys. I understand grain. I understand what makes it work. I know when I got a good crop and when I don't. She says to me, all right, when you lose $20,000, I want you out and out forever. No problem. I can do that, hon. 6 months later, I was out. It's not a game for the faint of heart. It's certainly not a game for our banks. The bankers not doing a better job at it than I was. The only difference is they spent billions and trillions of your dollars playing the game. I spent my own. So the lesson's hard to learn. And those are the things we've got to not repeat in history. As we move forward, let us try to be a better nation. Let's try to care for the people who need our help, but let's educate those folks. Let's reward people for good behavior, not bad behavior. So I'm going to close here in just a minute, but I do have a couple more things I want to kick around just real quick. The one on potatoes I wanted you to notice, $3.29 for 5 pounds. Now, I think these numbers here come from the D.C. area. At least my office in D.C.'s printed this for me. So the farmer got 31 cents. That's 10% of what the retailer got. And I'm not sure the retailer did anything but put them in a box. Look at that picture. I don't even think he sorted them for size. He got a pretty good return, you know. But the poor guy down there took all the risk. He didn't do so well. The reason I point out potatoes, I serve on another board for a company called Transition Resources, and we take care of migrant labor. And I did that because in a different life I raised tobacco. And we had Head Start programs, and they had to come in there about housing, because if you're going to have migrant labor and you need to provide housing, you need to provide good housing, and they happened to be a potato farmer. He wasn't doing the adequate job they thought to provide housing. The problem is they didn't understand that He didn't set his price. Somebody else told him what they would give him for that commodity. So he had no choice but deal with what he had. Do with what you got. Try to make it better. In closing, one other remark. I push for an issue that I think has been passionate to me. In the 50s, we had a thing called one man, one vote come through. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. It was a decision for the Supreme Court made, Russell versus Sim, that affected every state in the Union. Now, up until that time, most all the states were set up similar like our congressional government, where they had the lower house and a bicameral state was based on population. So you had X number of representatives from each county based on the population of said county. And your state senators was based similar somewhat on geographical location, depending on how many cities were involved, so where they did a little trading and spit back and forth in that regard. But as you all know, in our U.S. congressional setting, whether we like it or not, it's probably the best in the world. The House of Representatives is based on the population of each state. So each of your existing states you live in now gets so many representatives based on the population you have. But each state shall have, according to the Constitution, which I believe in, 2 U.S. senators. So we have a balance between rural and urban settings. So there's some give and take there. So no one side, whether you're lots of folks make all the decisions, or whether you're in a rural sector, you make all the decisions. But you're balanced back and forth. The states, every state in the Union is a little different, with the exception of Nebraska. Nebraska being the only state in the Union with a unicameral government. House, one house. The Supreme Court designated in the one man, one vote rule that every person would be represented equally. So with that thinking, they had 2 years to change. So what that amounted to, the House remained the same. But for your state Senate, they would be proportioned by population as well. Both houses come out of the same pot. The same type of thinking, the same representation. In Indiana, we have 92 counties. I have 100 state representatives. 28 of those representatives come from the county of Marion. That's capital, Indianapolis. Not a problem. I understand that. That's what Congress does. We have 50 state senators. 35 out of the 15 represents 10 counties. The other 82 counties share 15 state senators, and their House is worse than that. So all the rural areas have no effective say, can make no change at all. And the only states we have out here in our nation that can effectively work correctly for each constituents are those that are basically populated evenly across the state. So if you want to know what's happened to agriculture and why we've continually, in the big 3 words, consolidate, consolidate, consolidate over the years, is that we have a little help from the federal government. We have no help from our states. We have one dairy in our state. It's a big one. No, we got more than that, but one big dairy. 20,000 cows. The guy's got a carousel in there that's big as almost this auditorium. Holds 120 cows. Goes around 24/7. Got those cows trained. One cow gets off, one cow gets on, makes the ride. One cow gets on, one cow gets off, makes the ride. I think there's like 25 or 30 semi-loads go out of there a day. They had such a manure problem, they fixed that. They put in a digester, put a cap over top of that, produce some methane. Not a novel idea. The truck drivers that were hauling that milk, which one of them was my son-in-law, he was hauling 4 or 5 loads out a day, and they was transporting it all the way to Alabama, and they were going just amazing places with milk when they could be delivering right down the road. They lost their jobs because Kroger cut a deal, and they would buy trucks with methane motors, and they'd truck it for them. I guess that's fine. But people lost, in the consolidation there, some people that were doing that and had investments made, lost out. I guess it's the American way. I'm out of time. I thought I'd be short. Well, with that, I'm told to sit down and be still. Thank you very much. Do it. Do it.